So, why doesn't deterrence work? So, Todd Clear wrote this book titled Imprisoning Communities. And that's what this lecture is about. It discusses why incarceration does not deter. Incapacitation is expected to reduce crime. Basic, specific deterrence. But we know that this works only under very specific circumstances. Do you remember from the previous lecture? Individuals committed to conformity, individuals high self-control, strongly bonded, believe that crime is wrong, feel the punishment is fair and respectful, and feel that an effect has been made to forgive the offender. If those circumstances aren't in place, deterrence is less effective. If those circumstances are not in place, punishment is less effective at deterring. What we find and what Todd Clear argues in his Imprisoning Communities is that incarceration is in fact criminogenic. Does anyone know what criminogenic means? It means crime causing. So Todd Clear argues in his book that incarceration is concentrated in very particular communities. He explains that incarceration disproportionately affects African American communities. 1 in 9 Black male adults are incarcerated. 1 in 3 Black male adults are under some form of criminal justice supervision, meaning they are either on parole, on probation, or incarcerated. A Black male in his 20s without a high school diploma is more likely to be incarcerated today than employed. 70% of middle-aged Black men who never graduated from high school have been imprisoned. This concentrated incarceration harms communities. It harms African American communities and other communities of color. Imprisonment fosters community disadvantage. Clear describes how concentrated incarceration affects families in these communities, affects the economic vitality of these communities, affects the political power of these communities, and overall is criminogenic. So these are the effects of incarceration on communities. Those who are incarcerated are cut off from mainstream conventional society. While incarcerated, they are not provided with job trainings, any sort of life skills, trainings, rehabilitation. There's no treatment programs. They have less exposure to the world of work. And so they have greater chance of failure upon release. They earn less money if they find a job, which they are less likely to find a job. And when they find a job, they are less likely to stay employed. They are less likely to marry. I mean, it's hard to write on your Match.com profile that you are a formerly incarcerated individual. They suffer medical and psychological problems. They are denied public services. They are eventually caught up in the criminal justice system. They often have no place else to turn. Incarceration erodes the economic strength of these communities. Because individuals in these communities have been in prison, have been in and out of prison, it depletes the labor market prospects of that community. These individuals have no human capital. Human capital is related to an individual's skill set. So you think about your resume and all of your experiences that you've had thus far. The more experiences you gain, the more skills you gain, the higher level of capital you have. You are much more marketable to employers when you have all of those experiences, all of those skill sets. When you're incarcerated, and the majority of people in your community have been incarcerated, There is no human capital in that community. Incarceration harms trust in the political system. It harms the trust in the criminal justice system. In communities with concentrated incarceration, do not invoke the law on their own behalf, meaning they do not use the criminal justice system to help them. They do not see the political system as one that they could contact for assistance. They don't have a voice in the political system. The final effect of incarceration on communities is that it reduces informal social control. And if there's anything you gain from CRJU 304, it should be this. Informal social control is much more effective at preventing and reducing crime than is formal social control. Do you know the difference between formal and informal social control? Formal social control is controlled from a formal institution, primarily the criminal justice system, police, parole, probation. Informal social control is control that comes from the community, from your family, from your peers. When control is informal, it is much more effective at preventing, deterring, and reducing crime than is formal social control. What concentrated incarceration does to communities is it actually reduces informal social control. In these communities, there's very low stakes in conformity. The community is comprised of broken families. A son, an uncle, a grandfather, a father are incarcerated. Single moms are incarcerated. Therefore, parents and families are unable to effectively control their children. Children are exposed to parents or siblings who are incarcerated, which increases their chance of incarceration. You cannot provide pro-social values and definitions when you're in and out of prison. You cannot be an effective role model when you're not working. You have no social capital, meaning you have no networks in your communities that can provide you with resources. So concentrated incarceration is criminogenic. So Clear argues some very important policy implications that could reduce the negative impact of concentrated incarceration. First, you have to eliminate mandatory sentencing. Mandatory sentencing is keeping individuals in prison for longer periods of time, which cuts them off from conventional society, which cuts them off from their families, prevents them from getting a job. Long prison sentences are also incredibly costly. Confining state and local inmates costs the U.S. about $43 billion a year. Half of that could provide daycare to every family who can't afford it. It can provide a living wage job to every unemployed individual. So we need to redirect our capital from penal capital, which is where all the money goes in these communities, to social capital. He argues for community justice. We need to restore informal social control. Social control has been taken by formal control agents, the police. These should be reestablished in schools, in families. We should improve our schools, provide higher quality housing, invest in private sector businesses. Under community justice, we can facilitate community connections with the convicted. So you engage in a crime and your sanction takes place in the community. We need to shift from draconian sanctions to inclusive sanctions, imposing community service as a way to give back to the community. So that's Todd Clear's Imprisoning Communities. He outlines why incarceration has not had the impact on recidivism rates that Classical and even contemporary criminologists argue that it should have.